The thunder cracked across the sky like a bullwhip as Florence Blackwood ran through the muddy streets of Redemption Creek, her tattered dress clinging to her skin like a desperate memory. It was 1875, and the West had proven far less forgiving than the stories they told back east. The rain pelted down mercilessly, washing away the dirt from her face, but not the shame that clung to her soul like a shadow. Florence had arrived in this mining town 6 months ago with dreams as bright as new copper pennies. Now those dreams lay trampled beneath the boots of harsh reality. Her father's death had left her penniless, forcing her to take work at Madame Rosalie's establishment not as one of the girls, but as a laundress and cook. Still, in a town like Redemption Creek, association was condemnation enough. She stumbled and fell to her knees in the mud, her long auburn hair plastered to her face. The wanted poster clutched in her trembling hand was disintegrating in the rain, but she'd memorized every word. They were accusing her of theft, stealing a valuable ruby brooch from one of Madame Rosalie's wealthy clients. A crime she hadn't committed, but who would believe a woman who worked at a brothel? Florence pushed herself up, continuing her desperate flight toward the outskirts of town. The sheriff had given her until sundown to leave voluntarily or be escorted to the territorial prison. With no money and nowhere to go, she headed for the abandoned Miller cabin nestled in the foothills. It would provide shelter, at least for tonight. By the time she reached the dilapidated cabin, darkness had fallen completely. The structure leaned precariously, as if the next strong wind might finally claim it. Inside was little better a broken table, a three-legged chair, and a rusted iron stove with no wood. In the corner lay a threadbare mattress covered with a single woolen blanket. Florence collapsed onto the mattress, her body racked with sobs. She'd tried so hard to maintain her dignity, to keep herself clean despite the filth of her circumstances. But now, covered in mud, accused of theft, and hiding in an abandoned shack, she felt the full weight of her degradation. "I'm too dirty to be loved," she wept, curling into herself on the dirty mattress. The floorboards creaked. Florence gasped, instinctively pulling the thin blanket over her head like a child hiding from monsters. She hadn't heard anyone approach, hadn't noticed another presence in the cabin. A strong hand gently pulled back the blanket, revealing a tall figure standing beside her. In the dim moonlight filtering through the broken window, she could make out the silhouette of a man broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, with what appeared to be a rifle slung across his back. A cowboy, or worse, a bounty hunter. "Madam," his voice was deep but surprisingly gentle, "I believe you're sheltering in my temporary residence." Florence scrambled backward until her spine hit the wall. "Please," she whispered, "I didn't know anyone was staying here. I'll leave immediately." The man crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. In this storm, that would be a death sentence. He reached into his pocket and Florence flinched, but he merely struck a match, lighting a small oil lamp she hadn't noticed. The warm glow illuminated his features, a strong jaw darkened by stubble, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a face weathered by sun and wind. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair curling slightly at his collar. "Name's Noah Caldwell," he said, setting the lamp on the floor between them. "And you look like you could use some help." Florence wiped her tears with the back of her mud-stained hand. "I don't need charity, Mr. Caldwell." His lips curved slightly. "Good, because I don't have much to give." He shrugged off his duster, revealing a simple cotton shirt and leather vest. "But I do have coffee, jerky, and a fire that needs building. And you look half frozen." Noah moved to the stove, pulling kindling and wood from a stack she hadn't noticed in the shadows. As he worked to build a fire, Florence watched him warily. Men, in her experience, rarely offered help without expecting something in return. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked as warmth began to spread through the cabin. Noah didn't look up from the coffee pot he was preparing. Because my ma raised me right.
He paused.
And because whatever's chasing you seems worse than what might be ahead. Florence felt her defenses crumbling. They think I stole something. I didn't. Noah nodded, as if her innocence was never in question. Figured as much. Thieves usually have something to show for their troubles. He gestured to her tattered dress and muddied appearance. For the first time in months, Florence felt the faintest flicker of hope. Perhaps there was still kindness in this harsh world. She accepted the tin cup of coffee he offered, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth. "You can stay tonight," Noah said simply. "I'll take the floor. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Florence wanted to protest, to maintain what little pride she had left, but exhaustion overtook her. As she drifted into a troubled sleep, she heard Noah humming softly a gentle melody that seemed out of place in this broken-down cabin, yet somehow perfectly right. When morning came, Florence awoke to find Noah gone. For a moment, she thought he'd abandoned her, but then she noticed the fresh water in a basin by the stove and a clean if somewhat worn shirt folded beside it. A note rested atop the garment. "Gone hunting. Back by noon. Stay put." Florence used the water to wash away the worst of the mud and changed into the offered shirt, which hung like a dress on her slender frame. She was tying her damp hair back when Noah returned, a brace of rabbits in one hand and a bundle of what looked like clothes in the other. "Found these at the trading post," he explained, setting down the bundle. "Woman there owed me a favor. Said they might fit you." Florence stared at the simple calico dress and undergarments, then back at Noah. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know me." Noah busied himself preparing the rabbits for cooking. "I know enough. You're in trouble. You're scared. And you're not a thief." He glanced up. "Besides, I'm heading north to Wyoming territory. Could use some company on the trail, if you're of a mind to put some distance between yourself and this town." The offer hung in the air between them. Florence knew she should be suspicious, but something about Noah's straightforward manner made her want to trust him. "What's in Wyoming?" she asked cautiously. "Land," Noah replied simply. "My brother's been working a claim there. Says there's good grazing land nearby going unclaimed. Thought I might try my hand at ranching." Florence considered her options, which were painfully few. Stay and face prison for a crime she didn't commit, or take a chance on this stranger who had shown her more kindness in one night than she'd experienced in months. "I can cook," she offered. "And so, I'd earn my keep." Noah nodded, as if the matter was settled. "We leave at first light tomorrow. Best you stay hidden until then." For the remainder of the day, they prepared for the journey. Noah was efficient and focused, explaining his plans without unnecessary conversation. Florence found his quiet competence reassuring. By nightfall, they had packed as few belongings and what little food they could spare for the journey. As they sat by the fire that evening, Florence finally gathered the courage to tell him her story, how her father had died of pneumonia on the journey west, how the bank had seized their savings to cover his debts, how she'd been forced to take work at Madame Rosalie's to avoid starvation. I wasn't one of the girls," she said quickly. "I just cooked and cleaned." Noah nodded, his expression unchanged. "Not my place to judge what folks do to survive. God knows I've done things I'm not proud of." There was a story there, Florence thought, but Noah didn't elaborate and she didn't press. They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire crackled between them. "Thank you," Florence said softly as they prepared to sleep. "For believing me." Noah looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Get some rest, Miss Blackwood. We've got a long road ahead." They departed before dawn, Noah leading his sturdy bay gelding while Florence rode the mule he'd purchased from the livery stable. Their path took them away from the main roads, following game trails and narrow passes through the foothills. Noah explained that they needed to avoid the usual routes, at least until they were well beyond the reach of Redemption Creek's sheriff. The day was clear and cool, the landscape changing from scrubby foothills to open prairie as they traveled. Florence found herself studying Noah as he walked ahead of her. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the wilderness, his rifle always within reach. "Were you a soldier?" she asked as they stopped to rest the animals beside a small creek. Noah hesitated before answering. "Confederate cavalry. Joined up when I was 17. His expression darkened. "War ended, but the fighting didn't. Not for some of us." Florence understood then he was running from something too. Perhaps not the law, but demons of his own making. "Is that why you're going to Wyoming?" she ventured. "For a fresh start?" Noah looked at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Something like that. Figured a man could rewrite his story out there. Land doesn't care what you did before, only what you do with it now." Florence nodded, understanding completely. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Noah's expression softened slightly. "Likewise, Miss Blackwood." As days turned into weeks on the trail, Florence and Noah fell into a comfortable rhythm. She took over the cooking and mending, while he handled the hunting and security of their small camp. They spoke little during the day, focused on covering ground, but in the evenings, barriers gradually lowered. Noah told her about his childhood in Georgia, his mother's death when he was 12, his father's strictness. Florence shared stories of her own upbringing in Boston, her mother's beautiful garden, her father's dreams of finding gold in the West. "He wasn't a practical man," she admitted one night as they sat beside their small fire. "But he believed in possibilities. Said the West was where people could reinvent themselves." Noah stared into the flames. Was he right? Florence considered the question. "I don't know yet, but I'm still here. That counts for something." The journey was not without its challenges. A sudden squall forced them to seek shelter in a shallow cave for 2 days. Noah's horse threw a shoe, requiring a detour to a small settlement for repairs. Food ran low and game proved scarce in one particularly barren stretch. Through it all, Florence found herself growing stronger not just physically, but in spirit. The woman who had wept on a dirty mattress seemed to belong to another lifetime. Now she could ride all day without complaint, could help skin a rabbit without flinching, could face the uncertain future with something approaching courage. And increasingly, she found herself watching Noah when he wasn't looking the way his hands moved confidently over whatever task he undertook, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentleness he showed to animals and strangers alike. One evening, as they camped beneath a vast canopy of stars, Noah unexpectedly asked, "Do you miss it? The city life?" Florence considered the question. "I miss certain comforts. Hot baths. Libraries. Sometimes I miss the noise knowing other people are near." She looked up at the brilliant stars. "But I don't miss feeling trapped. Out here, I can breathe." Noah nodded, understanding in his eyes. "First time I saw the plains after the war, felt like my soul had room to expand again." It was the most poetic thing she'd heard him say, and Florence felt something shift between them, a deepening of trust, perhaps, or the recognition of a kindred spirit. The following day, disaster struck. As they forded a swollen creek, Florence's mule lost its footing on the slippery rocks. She was thrown into the rushing water, the current immediately sweeping her downstream. She heard Noah shouting her name as she struggled against the powerful flow, her heavy skirts dragging her down. Then strong arms were around her, pulling her toward the bank. Noah had abandoned his horse and plunged in after her. Together they fought the current, finally crawling onto the muddy shore several hundred yards downstream. Florence coughed up water, shivering violently as Noah checked her for injuries. His hands were gentle but thorough, his face a mask of concern. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice rough with fear. Florence shook her head, unable to speak through chattering teeth. Without hesitation, Noah gathered her in his arms, carrying her to higher ground. He worked quickly, building a fire, stripping off his own wet jacket, and wrapping his dry bedroll around her trembling form. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, his back turned to give her privacy. "You'll catch your death otherwise." Florence knew he was right, but embarrassment made her hesitate. I don't have anything dry to change into." Noah rummaged through his saddlebag, which had remained mostly dry, and produced a flannel shirt. "It's not much, but it's warm." He walked a distance away, giving her the privacy to change. Florence stripped off her sodden dress and undergarments, drying herself as best she could before pulling on Noah's shirt. It enveloped her completely, smelling of leather, pine, and something uniquely him. "Decent," she called softly when she was finished. Noah returned, his expression carefully neutral as he took in her appearance. He hung her wet clothes near the fire, then checked on the animals. The mule had survived but looked as bedraggled as Florence felt. "We lost some supplies," Noah reported, sitting across from her at the fire. "But the important things made it." His eyes met hers, and Florence realized with a start that he meant her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life." Noah shrugged uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. "No." Florence shook her head. "They wouldn't. Most people would have let me drown." The firelight illuminated Noah's face as he considered her words. "Then most people have forgotten what matters in this world." They sat in silence as night deepened around them. Florence was acutely aware of her state of undress beneath the blanket, of Noah's proximity, of the way his gaze occasionally drifted to her before quickly looking away. "Wyoming's still a good piece away," Noah said finally. "We'll need to stop somewhere to replace what we lost. Get you some proper clothes." Florence nodded, though the thought of entering a town filled her with apprehension. "Do you think we're far enough from Redemption Creek?" Noah considered. "Should be. But we'll be careful all the same. There's a settlement called Hollow Creek about 2 days' ride from here. Small place, but they'll have what we need." As Florence drifted toward sleep, she found herself studying Noah's profile against the dying firelight. For all their weeks of travel together, he remained something of a mystery, a man of few words and careful actions, whose rare smiles felt like unexpected gifts. What she did know was that he was honorable, kind in his quiet way, and far more educated than he let on. Sometimes she caught him reading from a tattered volume of Shakespeare when he thought she was asleep. Other times, she heard him humming classical pieces her father had once played on the piano. Most of all, she knew he looked at her not as damaged goods or a burden, but as a person of worth. It was a gift beyond measure. Hollow Creek proved to be little more than a wide spot in the trail, a general store, a saloon, a smithy, and a handful of rough cabins. Still, after weeks in the wilderness, it seemed almost bustling to Florence. Noah secured them a room at the small boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Peterson. It was a luxury to sleep in a real bed, even if the mattress was lumpy and the room barely larger than a closet. Noah took the floor without complaint, maintaining the propriety they'd established on the trail. "We'll say you're my sister," Noah had decided before they entered town. Recently widowed, traveling to join family in Wyoming. The simple story required few details and explained Florence's presence without inviting questions. The general store provided the necessities: a new dress for Florence, ammunition for Noah's rifle, dried goods to replace what they'd lost in the creek. As they were concluding their business, the shopkeeper, a balding man with suspicious eyes, squinted at Florence. "You look familiar, miss. You been through these parts before?" Florence's heart stuttered in her chest.
"No, sir."
"First time this far west." The man continued to study her.
"Huh.
"Could have sworn I'd seen your face somewhere." Noah stepped forward smoothly. "My sister's got one of those faces. People always think they know her." He placed coins on the counter. "We'll take those matches too." Outside, Florence struggled to control her breathing. Do you think he recognized me? Could there be wanted posters this far out? Noah guided her toward the boarding house, his hand protectively at her elbow. Doubtful. But we'll leave at first light, just to be safe. That evening, Noah returned to their room with a small package wrapped in brown paper. Got you something, he said, uncharacteristically awkward as he handed it to Florence. Inside was a simple silver hairbrush and a bar of rose-scented soap. Nothing fancy, but to Florence, who had been making do with a wooden comb and harsh lye soap for months, they were treasures.
Noah,
She began, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gifts. He waved away her thanks, clearly embarrassed. I thought you might like something. I don't know, womanly. Been rough. All this traveling. Florence ran her fingers over the smooth back of the brush. It's perfect. Thank you. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling neither was ready to acknowledge. Noah cleared his throat and turned away, busying himself with checking his rifle. Best get some sleep. Long ride tomorrow. Florence lay awake long after Noah's breathing had deepened into sleep. The simple gifts rested on the small table beside her bed, tangible proof that someone saw her as more than just a traveling companion or a responsibility. Noah had thought about her comfort, her feelings. It had been so long since anyone had. The next morning, they departed Hollow Creek before sunrise. As they rode past the general store, Florence noticed a new poster tacked to the bulletin board outside. Even in the dim light, she recognized her own face staring back at her, a crude drawing, but unmistakable. She urged her new mount forward, not daring to look back. Noah had noticed too. She could tell by the set of his shoulders as he rode beside her. They've increased the reward, he said quietly when they were well beyond the town limits. Florence felt sick with fear. How much? $200. An enormous sum, enough to tempt even honest men in these hard times. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've put you in danger. Noah's expression remained impassive. Changes nothing. We keep heading north. Wyoming territory's still the plan. They pushed harder over the next few days, riding longer hours and making camp only when absolutely necessary. Noah grew more vigilant, insisting they avoid trails and settlements. At night, he slept lightly, his rifle always within reach. Florence felt the weight of her circumstances pressing down once more. She'd begun to believe in the possibility of a fresh start, but now her past was literally following them, tacked to bulletin boards and saloon walls. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered ravine, Florence finally gave voice to the thought that had been haunting her. I should leave.
go my own way.
You'd be safer without me. Noah looked up sharply from the fire he was building. And go where? Florence wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere. Noah stood, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. That's not happening. Why not? Florence challenged, her own frustration boiling over. Why risk yourself for me? I'm nothing to you. Just someone you found crying in a cabin. Noah stared at her, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. Is that what you think? After all these weeks? Florence faltered under his gaze. I don't know what to think. I don't understand why you'd put yourself in danger for a woman accused of theft. A woman who worked in a brothel. A woman who cries in her sleep sometimes, but never complains during the day, Noah interrupted. A woman who reads Shakespeare over my shoulder and thinks I don't notice. A woman who saved half her dinner for a stray dog we met 3 days ago. Florence stared at him, speechless. Noah ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable with his own outburst. You're not nothing, Florence.
Not to me.
The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to confront. Florence felt tears threatening and turned away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. We should eat, she said finally, her voice barely audible. It's getting late. Noah nodded, allowing the moment to pass, but something had shifted between them, a truth acknowledged, if not fully embraced. That night, Florence dreamed of home, not Boston, but a place she'd never seen. A small cabin surrounded by wildflowers, mountains in the distance, the sound of a stream nearby. And Noah, smiling at her from the doorway, the shadows gone from his eyes. She woke with tears on her cheeks, the dream so vivid it left an ache in her chest. Across the dying embers of their fire, Noah watched her, his eyes reflecting starlight. Bad dream? He asked softly. Florence shook her head.
No.
Good one. Too good. Noah nodded as if he understood perfectly. The next day brought trouble in the form of 3 riders who appeared on the horizon behind them. Noah spotted them first, his keen eyes narrowing as he studied their approach. Could be nothing, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But let's not take chances. They diverted from their path, heading toward a stand of trees that offered some cover. The riders changed course accordingly, confirming Noah's suspicions. Bounty hunters, he said grimly. Or hired guns. Either way, they're after you. Florence felt cold fear spread through her veins. What do we do? Noah assessed their surroundings with a tactical eye she'd seen glimpses of before. There's a canyon about 2 miles east. Narrow entrance, defensible. We'll make our stand there if it comes to it. The canyon proved to be more of a box canyon, a dead end, but with high walls that prevented approach from the sides or rear. Noah positioned Florence and the horses at the back, then took up position behind a large boulder near the entrance. If things go badly, he told her, checking his rifle and revolver, take my horse and ride northeast. Follow the North Star. You'll hit a settlement called Fort Laramie in about 4 days. Florence shook her head. I'm not leaving you. Noah's expression softened momentarily. Stubborn woman. He handed her his revolver. You know how to use this? Florence nodded. Her father had taught her basic shooting during their journey west. Point and pull the trigger. There's more to it than that, but it'll do in a pinch. Noah glanced toward the canyon entrance. They're coming. Stay down and stay quiet. The 3 riders approached cautiously, clearly aware they were riding into a potential trap. They stopped at the canyon entrance, just out of effective rifle range. We know you're in there, Caldwell. One of them called. Send out the woman, and we'll let you ride away. Noah remained silent, his rifle trained on the speaker. $200 is a lot of money, the man continued. But we got no quarrel with you. This is business, nothing personal. Florence felt sick. These men were willing to drag her back to Redemption Creek for money, not caring about justice or truth. And now Noah was in danger because of her. Last chance, Caldwell, the bounty hunter shouted. The woman for your life. Noah's answer was a single rifle shot that knocked the hat clean off the speaker's head. The men scrambled for cover, cursing. That's your answer, Noah called. Now ride away while you still can. Instead, the bounty hunters spread out, using the rocks at the canyon entrance for cover. One of them fired a shot that ricocheted off the boulder, protecting Noah. What followed was a tense exchange of gunfire that lasted until dusk. Noah was careful with his ammunition, firing only when he had a clear shot. The bounty hunters seemed equally cautious, perhaps realizing that rushing the canyon would be suicidal. As darkness fell, the shooting stopped. Noah crawled back to where Florence waited anxiously. They won't try anything at night, he said, accepting the canteen she offered. Too risky, but they'll be waiting at first light. Florence's hands trembled as she tended to a graze on Noah's arm where a bullet had come too close. This is madness. You should never have helped me. Now you're trapped here, risking your life for someone I care about, Noah finished, his voice low but firm. So stop telling me I should have left you behind. Florence's hands stilled on his arm. You care about me? In the dim starlight, she saw Noah's expression soften. More than I should, probably. More than makes sense, given everything. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. Florence felt her heart beating wildly against her ribs. I thought I was too dirty to ever be loved again, she whispered, echoing her words from that first night in the cabin. Too damaged by what happened. Noah reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. There's nothing dirty about you, Florence Blackwood. Nothing that can't be washed away by rain or tears or time. Florence leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I'm afraid, she admitted.
Not of them. Of this.
Of feeling something I might lose. Noah's hand cradled her cheek. I know the feeling. Been running from it most of my life. Are you still running? She asked, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Noah shook his head slowly. Not anymore. Not from this. When his lips met hers, Florence felt as though something long broken inside her was finally mending. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening with a hunger that surprised them both. His arms encircled her, strong and protective, and Florence allowed herself to surrender to the feeling of safety, of belonging. When they finally parted, Noah rested his forehead against hers. We'll find a way out of this, he promised. And then we'll start fresh. Together. Florence nodded, clinging to his promise like a lifeline. Together. They spent the night huddled close, taking turns keeping watch. As dawn approached, Noah outlined his plan, a desperate one, born of limited options. I'll create a diversion at the eastern edge of the canyon. When they focus there, you take my horse and ride out hard to the west. There's a trail about half a mile down that leads into the hills. If you can reach it— No, Florence interrupted firmly. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. Noah's expression hardened. This isn't a debate, Florence. I can hold them off, give you time to what? Live with the knowledge that I abandoned you? That you might be dead because of me? Florence shook her head. We face this together or not at all. Their argument was interrupted by a new voice calling from the canyon entrance, not one of the bounty hunters, but a deeper, authoritative tone. Noah Caldwell. This is Marshal James Porter. I'd like to speak with you. Noah and Florence exchanged startled glances. Stay here, Noah whispered, moving cautiously toward his lookout position. I'm coming in unarmed, Caldwell, the marshal called. Just want to talk. Noah hesitated, then called back. Come ahead.
Slowly.
Hands where I can see them. A tall man in a dusty black coat entered the canyon, his hands held away from his body. He wore a silver star on his chest and carried himself with the confidence of long authority. Those bounty hunters have moved on, the marshal said as he approached. Convince them there were easier ways to make $200 than dying in a box canyon. Noah kept his rifle trained on the lawman. What do you want, Marshal? Porter stopped a respectful distance away. Information reached me about a woman being pursued for theft. Circumstances seemed unusual. His keen eyes took in Noah's defensive posture. I've been following those bounty hunters for 2 days, figuring they'd lead me to you.
Why?
Noah demanded. Because I received a telegram from Redemption Creek. Porter reached slowly into his coat pocket, withdrawing a folded paper. From a Madame Rosalie. Says the real thief confessed. Some cowhand who'd been sweet on one of her girls. The charges against Miss Blackwood have been dropped. Florence emerged from her hiding place, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Is that true? Marshal Porter nodded. Got the proof right here. The brooch was recovered, the real thief arrested. Sheriff Blake sends his apologies, for what they're worth. Noah lowered his rifle slightly, still suspicious. Why would the sheriff send a marshal to deliver this news? Porter's weathered face creased in a half-smile.
He didn't.
Madame Rosalie contacted the federal marshal's office directly. Seems she has connections. He extended the telegram toward Florence. She also wanted me to deliver a message. Says there's a position waiting for you as her business manager if you ever want to return. Says you were the only honest person in that whole establishment. Florence took the telegram with trembling hands, reading the words that granted her freedom. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept a ride to the nearest town, Porter suggested. You both look like you could use a proper meal and a night in a real bed. Noah finally lowered his rifle completely. Why help us, Marshal? You don't know us. Porter's expression grew serious. I know enough. Served with the 5th Georgia Infantry during the war. Recognize a fellow soldier when I see one. He glanced at Florence. And I believe in justice, not just the law. Sometimes they're not the same thing. The nearest town proved to be Prairie Wind, a growing settlement with a newly constructed hotel and restaurant. Marshal Porter insisted on paying for their rooms and meals, waving away their protests. Consider it the government's apology for your troubles, he said before departing. And Caldwell? Wyoming's good country for a fresh start. Good luck to you both. Alone in the hotel restaurant, Florence and Noah sat in stunned silence, the events of the past days still sinking in. I can hardly believe it, Florence said, looking at the telegram for the 10th time. It's over. I'm free. Noah watched her, a question in his eyes. Does that change your plans? Madame Rosalie's offer. Florence reached across the table, taking his hand. My place is with you. If you'll still have me. The smile that transformed Noah's face was like sunrise after the longest night. I'd planned on asking you to marry me once we reached Wyoming, he admitted. Thought I'd need to build something first. Prove I could provide. Florence squeezed his hand. I don't need a mansion, Noah. Just a home. With you. It won't be easy, he warned. Ranching is hard work, especially starting from nothing. Florence laughed, the sound bright with newfound freedom. After everything we've been through, you're worried about hard work? Noah's expression grew serious. I want to give you the life you deserve, Florence. Then love me, she said simply. That's all I need. They were married 3 days later by the local preacher, with Marshal Porter as their witness. Florence wore a new blue dress purchased from the town's small shop, and Noah had splurged on a proper suit. It was a simple ceremony, but to Florence it was perfect. That night, as they lay together in the hotel room that was now their bridal chamber, Florence felt the last of her fears melting away beneath Noah's tender touch. His hands, so capable with a rifle or an axe, were gentle as they traced the contours of her body. You're beautiful, he whispered against her skin. So beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. Florence felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy. I never thought I'd feel this way again.
Clean.
Worthy of being loved. Noah gathered her close, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. You were always worthy, Florence. Always. Their journey to Wyoming resumed with a new sense of purpose and joy. What had begun as a desperate flight had transformed into a journey toward home. They traveled more openly now, without the constant fear of pursuit, allowing themselves to enjoy the breathtaking landscapes of the West. Wyoming territory welcomed them with vast plains and distant mountains, the land wilder and more beautiful than Florence had imagined. Noah's brother Nathan had secured adjacent land for Noah, as promised 500 acres of prime grazing land with a creek running through it and timber for building. It's not much to look at now, Noah said as they surveyed the empty land that would become their home. But give it time. Florence squeezed his hand. I see it already. The house there by those trees. A garden behind it. Cattle grazing on the hillside. Noah pulled her into his arms, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. I see you. Growing old with me on this land. The first year was as difficult as Noah had warned. They lived in a one-room cabin while building their proper home. Noah worked from dawn until dusk, clearing land, constructing fences, acquiring a small herd of cattle. Florence planted a garden, learned to preserve food for the winter, and helped with the endless tasks of creating a ranch from raw wilderness. There were setbacks, an early frost that damaged their garden, a mountain lion that took 2 calves, a roof that leaked during the first heavy rain. But there were triumphs too: the completion of their modest but sturdy house, the first successful calving season, the friendship of neighboring ranchers who welcomed them into the small community. Through it all, their bond deepened. The tender love that had blossomed in adversity grew stronger with each challenge faced together. Noah's nightmares about the war gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future. Florence's fears of being judged for her past dissolved as she found acceptance among the practical, hard-working women of the territory. On their first anniversary, Noah surprised Florence with a piano, a second-hand upright that had traveled all the way from Denver. It had cost nearly all their spare savings, but the joy on Florence's face when she saw it made every penny worthwhile. "How did you know?" she asked, running her fingers reverently over the keys. Noah smiled. "You told me once that your mother played. I've seen you watching when we passed the church in town, heard you humming when you think I'm not listening." Florence played that evening, simple tunes at first as she reacquainted herself with the instrument, then more complex pieces as memory returned. Noah sat beside her, mesmerized by the transformation music brought to her face. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Caldwell," he said when she finally stopped playing. Florence leaned against him, content in a way she'd never imagined possible 2 years earlier. "So are you, Mr. Caldwell. So are you." As their second year on the ranch began, Florence discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Noah with equal parts joy and terror. "What do I know about being a father?" he worried as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting protectively over Florence's still flat stomach. "You know about love," Florence answered, covering his hand with hers. "The rest we'll figure out together." Their daughter, Emma, was born on a crisp autumn morning with the assistance of a neighboring rancher's wife. She had Noah's blue eyes and Florence's auburn hair, and from her first cry, she held their hearts completely in her tiny fists. Noah changed when Emma arrived, not dramatically, but in small, significant ways. He sang to her, something Florence had rarely heard him do. He carved delicate wooden toys in the evenings. He spoke to her of the ranch, of his plans for her future, as if the infant understood every word. "She's going to be like you," he told Florence one evening as they watched their daughter sleep. "Strong, determined." Florence smiled. "With your sense of honor, your kindness." Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered, their herd increased, and 2 years after Emma's birth, they welcomed a son they named Michael, after Florence's father. Their house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and Noah hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increasing workload. One summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Florence was struck by how far they had come from that rainy night in Redemption Creek. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked Noah. "How we met?" Noah's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Every day. Best thing that ever happened to me, finding you in that cabin." Florence leaned into his embrace. "I was so lost, so certain I'd never be clean again." Noah turned to her, his eyes as blue and steady as they'd been that first night. "You were never dirty, Florence. Not to me. I know that now." She touched his face, tracing the lines that hard work and weather had etched there over the years. "You taught me that." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the tenderness of their first embrace and the depth of understanding that comes only with years shared. When they parted, Noah rested his forehead against hers, a gesture that had become their own private symbol of connection. "I love you, Florence Caldwell," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." As twilight deepened into night, they called their children in for supper. The lamp in their window cast a warm glow across the yard, a beacon of home and family in the vastness of the Wyoming prairie. Florence paused in the doorway, watching Noah swing little Emma into his arms while Michael clung to his leg, both children laughing with the pure joy of being loved. The scene before her was everything she'd once believed impossible: a family of her own, a man who saw her true worth, a life built on love rather than survival. She had come so far from that rain-soaked night when she'd wept that she was too dirty to be loved. The journey had not been easy, but standing in the doorway of the home she and Noah had built together, Florence knew with absolute certainty that every step had led exactly where she was meant to be. "Coming, love," Noah called, holding out his hand to her. Florence smiled and stepped forward to join her family, leaving the shadows of the past behind as she moved into the light of home.